Hello, my bookish friends. Welcome or welcome back. I am Elizabeth. This is Reading Riley, and today we're going to talk about all of the books that I read in August. Thank you to Blackstone Publishing for sponsoring this video. I'm a little bit late. I'm sorry. I've had some life things going on, but I figured better late than never, so I am here to tell you about the books that I read in August. There were 13 of them. So as usual, I'm going to start with the lowest rated, work my way up to the highest rated. I will also separate it down in the chapters down here so it's a little bit easier to navigate through. Also, don't forget to check out my other social media, which I will pop right up here. And in the comments below, while you're watching, why don't you let me know what your favorite book was that you read this month? I'd be interested to find out. I'm always looking for more recommendations. So that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. Like I said, I have 13 books to talk about for August. I have one 2-star book, 2 3-star books, 3 3.5-star books, 4 4-star books, and 3 5-star books.
I hope that adds up. I think that's right.
Okay, don't come at me for this. Don't come at me for a couple of these. My first book that I want to talk about is my 2-star rated book, and that is How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. I didn't get it. I didn't get it, you guys.
I wanted to get it.
I didn't get it. I don't know, maybe some of this went over my head. It's very possible. Essentially, this is a story about a plague. It's told from all of these different perspectives, from all around the world, from all different places in time. I think it's supposed to be like an anthology. It's one story. It's one full story, just different perspectives. I found this book to be extremely depressing. Just utter futility. I felt so depressed the whole time I was reading this. Is it well written? Yes, it's well written. If you're not completely okay in your head and your heart, do not read this. And I hate even saying don't read it. It will take you down a spiral. It's very heavy stuff. If you want to cry, if you want to be emotionally broken, then yes, read it. Pick this up immediately because it will do that. But I'm not mad at it about that. I just feel like I wanted it to connect more. It kind of reminded me of The Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, which I loved this year. I gave it 5 stars. I'm trying to figure out what the differences were between those two. And I think The Sea of Tranquility felt a little bit snappier. It felt a little faster and shorter. It also had this kind of mystery element that we didn't have in How High We Go in the Dark. It just wasn't as much of a downer. Like, it was such a downer. I understand what he was trying to do, and I know a lot of people really enjoy this book, so don't let me stop you from reading it. If you're interested in it, read it. You might love it. I did talk to some people afterwards, and there were a couple things I definitely didn't pick up on as I was reading it, which would have probably made my experience more enjoyable. And there's some interesting things in there. There's a story with a talking pig, which I actually really liked that story. It's really like getting down to the dregs of humanity and relationships and how we're all connected, things like that. It just wasn't for me. I didn't love it. I gave it 2 stars. So let's move on to my 3-star books. The first one is Dear Laura by Gemma Amor. Don't come at me for this one either. I know a lot of people love this one. This has been huge on TikTok. I read this as part of Ashley's 24-hour horror-a-thon from Ashley's Little Library. You know, I thought this one was fine. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I did have some like psychological manipulation aspects in there that very much reminded me of Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. It reminded me of that, but it didn't give me that visceral punch to the gut like that one did. I felt like it was too short for me to get connected to the character of Laura, and I also felt like it wasn't as gory as I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be more visceral. I wanted it to be more extreme, I guess. We're following Laura when she was a kid. Her best friend and boyfriend was kidnapped right in front of her. So her whole life, she feels responsible for that. So we're following her throughout the years. She starts getting these letters in the mail on her birthday from the person who claims to be her friend's kidnapper. They are saying, I will give you hints. I will give you information about this, about who I am, about what happened to him, if you give me certain things of your own. And the things that they're requesting get more and more sinister and just kind of disgusting. So she's so desperate to figure out what happened to him. She feels all of this weight and all of this guilt from that she just goes along with it. And so it kind of takes over her life. Like I said, I thought it was good. I thought it was well done. I just didn't love it. It wasn't for me. It wasn't dark enough. I didn't connect with Laura like I would have wanted to, but I thought it was fine, and it's a really quick read, so if you want to pick it up, it's not like you're going to waste a whole lot of time if you end up not liking it. My next 3-star book is When She Returned by Lucinda Berry. I'm sad to have given this one 3 stars because, you know, I love Lucinda Berry. Even with this having a 3-star rating, like I still see the things in this that I love about Lucinda. The writing is on point, the character depth is on point. Like she understands human beings, she understands vulnerability, she understands what motivates us and what makes us tick. And that's what I love about Lucinda Berry, and that is very much in this book. I read this as part of my cult vlog. I will link it above and down below. I read books about cults, and this was one of them. So this is about a woman, Kate, who went missing 11 years ago, and she gets sucked into this cult. So we're following her in the past, 11 years ago, as she's investigating. She's a journalist and she's investigating this cult to write a piece on it. It's kind of showing her skepticism, and then as she kind of gets sucked in, and it's understandable how she does get sucked in. It really feels like it's true to real life. Like this book really felt like more of like a nonfiction book in the way that it felt so true to how cults do get you and how they suck you in. And then we're also in the current day, 11 years later, we're following the perspective of her daughter and her husband's new wife. She ends up coming back, she's showing back up, she's completely emaciated, she's got this like newborn baby. She's trying to reintegrate into her life with her family. And so there's just a lot of really hard things that happen within this family as they are all trying to adjust to what's happening. There are some really touching moments between her and her daughter, but I think I really wanted this to be twisty. Like when I read a Lucinda Berry book, I want it to be super twisty, I want it to be shocking, and it wasn't really those things, but it was gritty, so I will give it that. I just didn't love the ending. It could have been a 5-star book for me. I did not love the ending, but like I said, I feel like the ending is how it would have legitimately ended if this was real, and so I can't discredit that. Let's get into my 3.5-star ratings. First of all, I want to talk about Pignon Scorbion and the Barbershop Detectives by Rick Bleiweiss. This one was so graciously sent to me by Blackstone Publishing, and I read this month. I did enjoy this one. I thought it was a really cute, kind of quirky mystery. This one is following Pignon Scorbion, and he is this kind of Sherlock Holmes-esque, this Poirot-esque detective. This is small town England in the 1910s. This book itself is really well made, and it's like got some weight to it. It's really nice. And Rick Bleiweiss, I just read in the back of this that he has had this like long standing musical career where he was a producer, songwriter, and worked with like the Backstreet Boys and the Bee Gees and Whitney Houston and like all of these other people, which is freaking badass. But the book itself, it's not like one mystery that goes throughout. It's 3 separate mysteries, and they all take place in this barbershop. So Pignon is coming back to this small town, and he has an old friend who owns this barbershop. And so he's meeting up with him, and when he gets there, he meets kind of the crew of the barbershop. As they're there, a crime comes to light, and they have to get to the bottom of this. So Pignon is very much a peacock of a man. He's eccentric. You know, he likes his shoes polished just a certain way. He wears things that make him stand out for the time. He's very smart. He's very witty. So he kind of deputizes these people in the barbershop, and they help him to solve this mystery. Then after that, every time after, they kind of gather people in this barbershop, and this is going to be the setting of basically this entire story. These mysteries are interconnected. There is a little bit of a romance subplot along the way. I thought it was really quirky and fun. And so if you're looking for something that is just kind of short and a quick read, this one might be for you. I'm gonna pop up the URL right here if you're interested in getting this. Go check out the URL. It's also gonna be in the description box down below. And so if you're interested, put a little bit of fun back into your reading with this classic throwback whodunit. The next book I want to talk about is Runtime by Catherine Ryan Howard. I read this on audio. This one I'm giving 3.5 stars as well. I thought it was good. I think some people are really going to enjoy this. There was something about it that just didn't strike me, but I really loved the meta quality of this. We're following Adele, who was this soap star as a child. She was like a child star and like grew into this, and she has aspirations to be a movie star. So she quits the soap and she tries to make movies, but something happens on the set of one of the movies that she's filming. She's kind of traumatized by it. Now she can't get any work. She can't get any work at all, and she's freaking out. She doesn't know if this is what she wants to do, if she needs to find, just like a regular job. This is all she's ever known. When suddenly she gets offered this part on the set of Final Draft, which is a horror movie. The tagline of Final Draft is based on a terrifying story that hasn't happened yet. She's replacing this other actor last minute. It's a very small crew. It's set in the middle of the woods in this cottage, and so it's all kind of creepy and eerie. And she's kind of afraid that she's gonna have, you know, a little bit of a breakdown based on what happened last time she was on set. This could be a career-defining moment for her, so she's sticking it out. But then the things that happen in the script of this movie that she is acting out start to happen in real life. It's set in this cottage, and things are happening to her in this cottage that are mimicking what's in the script. And then we find out that the script, inside the script, the character is having experiences that are mimicking a book. So it's like 3 levels of meta. I know that sounds kind of confusing. I hope that makes sense to you. But that part I really liked, because you're going from the story inside this book that's happening to this woman in this movie that's happening to another woman who's playing the part of this person in the movie. Does that track? I don't know. So yeah, I thought it was smartly written, and I like what she was trying to do with this. Something about it just didn't feel that original to me. Aside from that, the story, the twists, it was fine. It was all fine. I think it was better than average, but it's not one of my favorite books of the year. I'm not mad that I read it. I definitely would recommend it. I think there are people that would love this. The next book that I read that is 3.5 stars is Out There by Kate Folk. This is another anthology, and this is kind of just weird stories. Some of them are set in this world where it's almost like 5 minutes into the future, kind of techno thriller-esque. John Mars-esque. Some of them are not, some of them are just weird. Generally, I really liked this. I enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars because some of the stories I just thought were way too short. When I read a short story, this is what I want. I want it to immediately go into the action. I want to be invested immediately, and I want there to be one sort of twist or reveal. Even if it just leaves it up in the air, I want one little moment where I'm like, oh, that's what I want out of a short story. And some of them just didn't do that for me. Some of them were just trying to be oddly, it felt like it was trying to give me a zinger, but I didn't feel the zinger, you know? Some of them were really good. I read this because of Kayla, this one and How High We Go in the Dark, based on her recommendation. And this one's definitely more up my alley. I would read more from this author for sure. I would love to see a full-length novel from this author. I think if she took one of these ideas and made it into a full-length novel, it might be amazing. So I would definitely recommend this one. It's just that some of the stories I didn't love, some of them I did love, so it's hard to rate an anthology. They weren't all one story like How High We Go in the Dark was. They were all separate, and so it's just really difficult to kind of rank them separately. Generally, I had a good time with this one. Okay, moving on to my 4-star books, and I'm really excited to tell you about some of these because some of them just came out of nowhere for me, and I think you're really gonna like them. The first one is Wrong Place, Wrong Time by Gillian McAllister. This was a fun ride. It was a fun ride. First of all, I want to say I think Gillian McAllister is an astute observer of human nature. And I like that about her. I will definitely read more of her books. This book is following Jen, who is a mother. She witnesses her son kill somebody for no reason. Her kind, loving son kills somebody in their front yard one night. Then her world starts to crumble. He gets taken to jail, and she wakes up the next morning thinking, what the hell am I gonna do? And she realizes she is in the day before. And it's not just that, because she keeps going back farther and farther in time, and not just a week. I want you to know going into this, because I was assuming it was gonna be like maybe a week. No. She goes back years in the past. Throughout this, we're following her perspective, and we're following the perspective of this young police officer named Ryan, I believe, and he is just kind of trying to find his way and trying to understand what's going on. I have a couple of critiques about this. It was a little bit slow through the middle, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I wasn't expecting it to just keep going back and back and back and back and back. And I was like, when does it end? And also, there were some pop culture references in there that I really liked, but I thought it was a little bit weird to mention things like Donald Trump and Joe Biden and never mention the cocoa. It's like we're set in the same time, but they're just in this world where that never happened, where the cocoa doesn't exist, which I thought was a little bit, I guess maybe idealistic, I don't know. But I felt like it was kind of ignoring some of the stuff that's happening. which, you know, is obviously a choice that authors have to make now.
But
there are 2 twists in this that I really liked. I thought it was executed really well, and they made that little bit of a slow middle part completely worth it. I think this story was interestingly written. Gillian McAllister is just like really great at getting down to the nitty-gritty of her characters, which I really enjoyed, and the twists were fun. This was a fun ride. I had a good time with it. I would definitely recommend trying this one. The next 4-star book I have is On a Quiet Street by Serafina Nova Glass. I'd never heard of this author. I'd never heard of this book, but my friend Kat told me to read this. She said, I read this book, I think you would like it, you should check it out. Then I discovered the narrator for the audiobook is
Imogen Church.
Do you know me? If you do, you know that I love Imogen Church. She is one of my favorite narrators, and I feel like this is one of her best performances ever. For just that alone, this was worth it. We're following 3 different women who live in this kind of affluent neighborhood. This is kind of a classic domestic thriller because everything looks perfect on the surface, but once we get inside their heads, inside their perspectives, we realize how effed up their situations actually are. One of these women is British, and the other 2 are American. And so Imogen Church has to go back and forth between a British and American accent, and I think she did a really good job. So we're following these 3 women, and they're all very distinct. I loved each one of them. Like at first I was kind of annoyed by them, but as I got to know them more, the more attached I got to them and the more I was invested in this story. So the first one is Cora, and she's kind of the optimistic helicopter parent, in your face, very like head of the PTA, always doing things. And she thinks her husband Finn is cheating on her, and so she wants to catch him in the act. Then we're also following Paige. Paige lost her son a year ago in a car accident, and she is just like, her life is gone downhill. She's having a lot of trouble dealing with this. It still has not been worked out what actually happened to her son, and so she spies on all of the neighbors, trying to figure out who was involved in this, what happened, and get down to the bottom of this. And then we also have their neighbor Georgia, who's just this really quiet young mother. Just seems like she has this perfect life, this perfect husband, but Georgia's dealing with some things that Paige and Cora could never imagine. You get into this tangled web of their lives. I was craving a domestic thriller, and a good domestic thriller, and I was really happy to read this one. It just hit the spot. I think it was a fun time. Definitely recommend the audio. All right, the next 4-star book that I have to talk about is Below by Laurel Hightower. I read this as the buddy read for the 24-hour horathon from Ashley's Little Library. This one surprised me. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. It's a really quick, short horror novella. We're following this character, Addie, as she goes through this high-action survival story. She's leaving her husband, so she has this kind of cross-country trip, and the weather starts to get really bad. There's an accident somewhere along the way, and she ends up trying to fight for her life. I saw this, you know, bat-looking Mothman thing on this cover thinking this was going to be a creature feature. There's not a whole lot about the lore of like what this is, so if you're in it for the lore, you may not like this. But what I was not expecting is the kind of feminist nature of this book. This creature represents something more than you might think. While Addie is struggling to escape her past, she's having to reacquaint herself with herself, really making her rethink what is important in her life. There is some mildly gory body horror in here, which I enjoyed. And it's got this kind of fantastical, almost mystic atmosphere to it, while still staying solidly within the horror genre. This one surprised me. I had a good time with it. I definitely recommend it. A really cool read. Okay, this next one I thought was 4 stars, but I did give it 3.5 stars. Of course, I always round up on Goodreads. So this is kind of backtracking a little bit, but I still want to talk about this one, and that is Within These Walls by Anya Alborn. I read this one again for my cult reading vlog. I enjoyed this one. I've read 2 Anya Alborn books now, and I've liked both of them. We do talk about cults, and we get a lot about occult as well, but there's also this kind of supernatural / paranormal element in here that was not present in the other cult books and that I wasn't necessarily expecting. But it definitely added this quality to it that made it scary in a different kind of way. We're following this author who is a nonfiction author and a true crime writer. And he's kind of past his prime. He is having difficulties with his marriage. He's got a 12-year-old daughter, and their relationship is strained. His daughter is going through a phase right now where she likes this kid who's goth. And so she's starting to dress in all dark clothes. She's starting to get into the occult and like things like that. And so he's trying to like just go with the flow because he kind of had stages like that in his childhood as well. He gets a letter from this cult leader who's been in jail for years. He's never told anybody about his story, and he says, look, I read your book. I want to tell you my story, but I have conditions and I need you to move into this house where everything happened. All these people within his cult completed suicide in this house, and he wants our writer to move in this house. And so he does. And shit hits the fan. I had a few critiques within it. The things that were happening with the daughter and her age, like she felt a lot older. She read a lot older than 12, and I wish that they had made her like 15 or 16. That's kind of a small point. I did like the ending. I don't think everyone will like the ending. Not as good as Brother, as how that ended, but kind of along that same vein. I don't want to spoil anything, but it doesn't go according to plan. There's not a happy ending here. But anyway, I thought it was good, and I would recommend this as well. Okay, now we're gonna get into my 5-star books, and 2 of them are Karen Slaughter. Spoiler, 2 of them are Karen Slaughter. The first one is Indelible by Karen Slaughter. This is, I believe, the 4th book in the Grant County series, the first of which is Blindsided. And so I'm not gonna get super into the details of this, but essentially this one is following Sarah, and she and Jeffrey are in like a hostage situation. Most of this book is in flashback. When we flash back to the past, we're learning about how Sarah and Jeffrey met, how they saw each other before they knew each other, how they got to know each other, and how certain things that they learned influenced their decision in the present. And it's just so well written. And you know, Karen Slaughter, I mean, the character work is on point. I love Karen Slaughter. Start reading this series if you have not already. Blindsided, so good. The next one is Girl Forgotten by Karen Slaughter. Are we surprised? Granted, I'm biased. I love Karen.
I love her. I love her.
I've heard some mixed reviews on this one, but I had a really good time with it. This is the 2nd book, the first of which is Pieces of Her, which I didn't love as much. And it's not one of her more popular books, but this is the sequel to that one. It does not have to be read after the first one. Let me make that clear. It does kind of spoil the first book. So if you don't want to read Pieces of Her, but you want to read Girl Forgotten, you can read it out of context. But if you plan on reading Pieces of Her, definitely read that first, because you're going to get spoiled for it in the 2nd book. But anyway, we're following Andy, and she has become a U.S. Marshal. So again, I don't want to get too far into it as far as details, because I don't want to spoil Pieces of Her. But essentially, Andy gets assigned to this case, but she has ulterior motives that are connected to her dad. So she's kind of distracted by this other case that happened in the 80s. And as she's investigating one, it's connected to the other. There is a killer that's still out there, and she's determined to take them down. I thought it was great. I love Karen Slaughter. I have one more book to talk about, and that is The Last Housewife by, what is her name? Why do I always forget her name? I'm so sorry. Is it Stacey Willingham? Ashley Winstead. I always think it's Stacey Willingham. Why do I mix them up? I'm such a bad person. Anyway, The Last Housewife. This is another cult book. This was the one I gave the highest rating to, the one that I enjoyed the most out of all 3. So much social commentary, a lot going on here. This is a sex cult. It has a lot to do with the patriarchy, with women, their position in the world. And so it's got a lot of triggering things in there, a lot of triggering things.
And I'm just warning you right now, be careful going into this because it goes there.
It goes there. So we're following Shay, who actually lives in Dallas, around where I live, and so that was really fun for me. She's got this really old friend of hers that she grew up with, her best friend growing up, Jamie, who is now the host of a true crime podcast. When she's listening to that and she hears him say one of her college friends has been found dead, she has to investigate. So she gets together with Jamie, they go back to her college in upstate New York, I believe, to figure out what happened to her friend. And come to find out, she has this really, really traumatic past with this friend. The podcast element is not like a produced podcast. You're not getting the final product. You're getting her being interviewed by Jamie, telling him the story of her past, and that's where we get into the cult. And then we see the implications of that. There's a lot of talk in here about beauty, about how it grants us favor, but also vulnerability at the same time. Power. Who has power? How do we attain it? And who determines that? And also about consent. At what point can it no longer be freely given? If you can't give consent when you are drunk, say, does that apply if you're brainwashed? And at what point do you say this person is brainwashed and this person is not? Can we not say that we're all technically brainwashed because we've grown up in the patriarchy? So can we ever truly give consent? Like, there's a lot of discussions like that within here that I just thought were really well thought out and really fascinating. Again, if you want to see my full thoughts, check out that vlog. I will link it above and below. And I'm also going to be discussing this live with my friend Gabby from Books and Other Nerd Things. So that's going to be on September 25th at 11 a.m. Central Time. So if y'all are interested in joining us for that, that would be amazing. We're going to just talk about The Last Housewife and go through the nitty-gritty details of that. So I would love to see you there. I will link Gabby's channel down below as well. We're also going to be joined by Heather from Heather's Book Review. Those are the 13 books that I read in August. Thank you for hanging out with me as always. I appreciate you so much. Let me know in the comments below, have you read any of these? What were your thoughts? Do you agree with my opinion? Do you not? And that's gonna be it for me today. Don't forget, y'all, that life is short, so read Riley. Cheers and goodbye.